Hi, my name is Sierra. In the following slides, I will be analyzing the first encounter scenes in Luchino Visconti's Assassione and Michelangelo Antonioni's Story of a Love Affair. To begin with, both scenes occur very early on in the films. Assassione from 3 minutes and 58 seconds to 5 minutes and 45 seconds, and Story of a Love Affair from 12 minutes and 54 seconds to 13 minutes and 20 seconds. While in the grand scheme of the film's running time this may seem small, much can happen and does happen in those first few minutes. This is greatly illustrated by Antonioni's Story of a Love Affair. By the first encounter between Paolo and Guida, only 12 minutes in, it is understood that the characters may be meeting for the first time in the fabula, but not the Suzette. Whereas this is the first encounter for Visconti's characters in both the fabula and the Suzette in Assassione. Further, Visconti introduces his characters so early in the film that the audience has yet to discover what their encounter could mean for the direction of the events to follow. Antonioni's film, in contrast, presents a different narrative, in which the characters are discussed before their introduction, so not only does the audience have more information regarding these characters, they also know the film's themes are deeply entrenched in crime. Shifting the focus to Assassione, the first encounter scene takes place in a rural area of Italy in the trattoria, a restaurant. The trattoria seems to symbolize what the characters are about to find in one another, which is comfort, a feeling socially and culturally understood to be often gained through food. Once inside the trattoria, there is the diegetic sound of a love song being sung by Giovanna. The music informs the audience that the following story will be a love story, and by using diegetic rather than extra diegetic sound, the director creates a shared connection and understanding between Gino and the audience of Giovanna's possible desires, as we understand she may be a romantic. The characters go on to converse with one another with ease. They disagree at first, as Giovanna wants him to wait outside the kitchen for the food, and he simply dismisses her and continues to loiter by the stove. The disagreements and continuation of conversation are akin to the relationship between husband and wife, which is furthered in the actor's positioning and movements throughout the scene, such as Gino tasting the food on the stove and making himself comfortable by removing his jacket and sitting at the table while Giovanna begins to make him a plate. Character details. In this scene, we see Giovanna from Gino's perspective as his back is to the camera. She sits on the corner of the counter swinging her legs. There are many details within this scene that reveal the characters and the themes of the film. Here, Giovanna's shoes hang loosely on her feet, and it is clear that they are slightly too small for her. This small detail mirrors the state of her marriage and her life, as she does not fit its constraints. She paints her nails, or looks at them, as she sits, something most women in her position likely would not be doing because firstly they would be finding work to do around the house or restaurant, and secondly because her job is one that leads to chipped nails, not manicured ones. Therefore, in this one shot, Visconti has offered the audience an idea of who Giovanna is and what she desires. Next, we see Giovanna do a double take upon seeing Gino in the doorway. The camera then offers a close-up shot that continues to zoom in on Gino's face and lingers for a few seconds, providing the viewer with what we assume is Giovanna's perspective. This close-up shot shows the director's interest in the individual and the worldly perception of them. The shot also reveals a reversal of classic gender roles as Gino becomes the object of desire, a position normally reserved for women. Giovanna's double take shows desire and objectification of his physical features, which is emphasized by the camera zoom and the dialogue as Gino is forced to repeat his question to her. This is also foreshadowing the future nature of their relationship, as Giovanna will later dismiss his wants and needs in favor of her own. The characters begin to move around one another. Gino enters Giovanna's space, the kitchen, and she in turn moves in relation to him, following him to the stove and then stepping back. There is a feeling of caution to Giovanna's movements, as she does not trust herself around someone she finds so appealing. Rather than kick the mysterious stranger out of her kitchen, as we assume she would with anyone else, she seems to relax into his presence, standing intimately close as he tries her cooking. By the end of the scene, Giovanna's husband is heard calling to her. She wraps her arms around her body as if to brace herself for his presence, and in that moment, the loose comfortability and confidence she displayed while alone with Gino disappears. While taking off his jacket, Gino places himself in a position of submission to the viewer. With his back to the camera, he has no power, just as historically, women's eyes were made to face down and away from the viewer in paintings and other renditions. Gino's undershirt alone reveals much about his character. The shirt is simple and white, but also dirty, and it's clear that not only is he a nomad, he also travels with the shirt on his back. The shirt also reveals his arms, which Gina comments are very muscular, a sign of someone who does hard labor. Clearly, Gino is not afforded the comfortable life of someone such as Giovanna's husband, whose weight hints towards a large appetite and little manual labor. Giovanna wears an apron, which shows she too works for a living, but the apron is clean, with a beautiful flower pattern on it. Although it is just an apron and will in time get dirty, Giovanna has chosen to wear one with a delicate design on it, as well as a low neckline and a tie that very clearly accentuates her hourglass figure. While minor, she has found ways to display her femininity and her yearning to be loved and desired by a man, unlike her very undesirable husband. Moving on. In Story of a Love Affair's first encounter scene, Paola emerges from the theater with her husband and friends, all dressed elegantly while they discuss what she wants for her birthday. This cues the audience into Paola's socioeconomic status. As they begin to walk down the street, Paola lingers back as she sees Guido. They are divided by a road which Guido stands in the middle of, and the audience sees his expectation that Paola will meet him in the middle. When she does not, the divide remains and a power dynamic is created as Guido stands risking being hit by a car waiting for Paola, who simply walks away. This dynamic sets the tone of their relationship for the remaining course of the film. The scene is filled with the diegetic sounds of traffic, which again highlights the importance of the road between them, and the extra diegetic music that sounds like a tragic romance, foreshadowing the oncoming events of the film and cluing the audience into the nature of their relationship. The use of framing and shadows conveys much of the meaning of this scene to the audience, making up for the absence of dialogue. Both characters are framed by the world around them on their opposing sides of the road, adding to their separation. Guido is framed by the wall-to-wall advertisement that stands behind him, while Paola, in one shot in particular, stands alone under an archway outside the theater. On either side of her, separated by the columns of Paola's arch, are people in pairs and groups. Both the choice of low-key lighting, combined with an all-white costume dress, further illuminates and divides Paola from those around her, who are dressed in black and almost disappear under the low-key light. The composition of this scene adds to the emotions of the scene as the characters are made to look small in comparison to the buildings around them, as though they are to be swallowed up by them. So, while the road stands as a divide between the two characters, it is clear that they share a feeling of loneliness surrounded by people who are content with their lives while they are not. Bringing them together. Both scenes portray the plight of characters succumbing to their more carnal emotions of love and desire. In their comparisons and contradictions of one another, the film's first encounters still manage to present similar themes. Ossessione presents loneliness through its rural environment, while Story of a Love Affair presents it through the noise of the urban environment. The characters in both films are drawn to one another in a need to escape the loneliness of the environment that divides them. Further, the theme of criminal activity is created through the use of low-key lighting in Story of a Love Affair, but through character movement and facial expression in Ossessione, as the mood quickly darkens upon the arrival of Giovanna's husband. Both Antonioni and Visconti have focused on the individuals within the scene to explore the human involved. We can see through their costumes their desires in life. Giovanna, despite being stuck in a kitchen in a loveless marriage, dresses to emphasize her beauty and femininity. Paola is dressed in jewelry and a white fur coat, speaking to her position of wealth and also her desire to maintain this position. The men, on the other hand, are both dressed fairly simply. Gino's costume conveys that he is happy with little material possessions, as he travels with only the clothes he has on. Guido is dressed in a nice but plain and presumably affordable pea coat. It seems to be more of a brown color, while the men on the theater side of the road, the seemingly wealthier side, wear black. Guido's main desire is not wealth, but Paola's love. Lastly, the male leads in both films and first encounter scenes are played by the same actor, Massimo Girotti. While this was merely coincidental, it brings to mind the idea of duality within the films. These characters, despite their many differences, are truly no different at their core. That wraps up my compare and contrast analysis of the first encounter scenes from Story of a Love Affair by Michelangelo Antonioni and Ossessione by Luchino Visconti. I hope you liked it.